Hi folks, welcome back to this third segment of the Chapter 4 video series on components of a compensation strategy. So this third method for determining base pay is very, very different from job evaluation, and we refer to it as pay for knowledge. The term pay for knowledge really includes both competency-based pay, which is usually applied at a managerial or professional level, and skill-based pay, which is usually applied at the operational level. And an example of where we saw it applied at an operations level is when we talked about one of the vignettes in the earlier chapters, which is with LSE galvanizing, when they applied it on a production line basis. Now, what we're really talking about here when we talk about pay for knowledge, the way we're going to look at it again is looking at both competency-based pay for people at a professional level, managerial level, as well as at the operating level. But in your textbook, they've kind of differentiated them, but they really are one and the same thing. They're just applied to two different groups of employees. But if we look at pay for knowledge, again, and looking at it from the perspective of the managerial or professional level employee, what we're really saying is as employees gain more skill and more abilities, we're going to pay them for accumulating all of these different competencies or skills and abilities. So it doesn't really necessarily matter whether or not they're using those skills and abilities at that particular time when they accumulate them, but we're actually going to reward them for it. Now, one of the advantages of doing that is that there's definitely an incentive for the employee to develop a skill level, whether you need it immediately in that employee or not, and the incentive to the employee is that they're going to get paid for it. There's really no disincentive to move away from the organization. So if you're investing in training and developing your employees, you're more likely to catch them, to keep them captive to you and to keep them with you. There's a high workforce flexibility, meaning that, say for example, somebody's off sick, somebody else in the organization has the skills to take over that particular job, then you can move that person in there until the other person comes back. So you can move your employees around and really enrich their job experience while they're with you. You really don't need job descriptions anymore because you, as a competent person, might move around and do several different jobs. The jobs are broader, again, because you have a broader skill base in your employees, and it could motivate you more intrinsically, right? Because the rewards of having more job skills that you know how to do, or more things you know how to do around the organization, can actually build your confidence, build your self-esteem, and most people consider that to be an intrinsic reward. Could also improve customer service. So, for example, if somebody in the customer service area is away from their job, again, somebody else can come in, fill in, and maybe deal with customer complaints, customer issues, deal with, say, somebody in the shipping area is away and they would have dealt with a particular customer complaint on a short shipped order or something like that. Maybe you can step in and resolve the issue. So again, customer service can be improved, and it really does support a high involvement management strategy, which we saw when we looked at LSE galvanizing. Some of the disadvantages, just to point out, is that it is certainly going to raise your labor costs because you're going to pay people for skills that they have, so it's going to cost you more. So you're probably going to be at the top of that 70% of your operating budget is maybe taken up by compensation pay. Topping out problems, meaning that you could have people who are making a lot of money in your organization who may or may not be able to use all of the skills that they have at the time when they have them. And again, that's another issue. Some of the skills that they gain may get rusty if they're not able to use them. So you have to make sure in your organization you have the fluidity whereby you can move people around in your organization so you can take advantage of the skills that they're developing. Clearly, that's going to increase your training costs. Unions may also be a little more resistant because it's not based on seniority, it's based on skills or competencies that people have. And because it can can be expensive, you find that many organizations can't continue with it. So the discontinuation rate in organizations for this kind of thing could be quite high. So you really have to make sure that before you decide to look at pay for knowledge or pay for skill, that your environment really has the ability to harness the skills that employees are amassing and really use those skills in the organization on an ongoing basis in order to really capitalize on the advantages that this kind of compensation system brings. Now, when we look at it from a skill-based pay perspective, again, kind of a subset of competency-based pay. Pay for knowledge, again, is looking more at the managerial or professional level. But again, on a skill-based pay, we're looking more at an operational level. Again, it's going to provide an incentive for employees to learn a variety of different skills. Doesn't need job descriptions. It supports behaviors that are needed. So sometimes production jobs can get a little bit boring, a little bit routine, a little bit monotonous. But here what you can do is some of your production workers might want to become licensed pipe fitters. They might want to become electricians, that kind of thing. This way they might have the opportunity in your organization to get the experience required to become licensed and again have that skill. So if the electrician is away in the summertime at his or her cottage up north and you have electrical problems, you might already have staff that's there that's ready and able to deal with some of the issues that you might have instead of having to call that person back from their vacation, So those kinds of things. And it does promote change to a high involvement organization, which is again similar to what we said under pay for knowledge. It supports the high involvement strategy. Some of the disadvantages is that workers could top out. Again, very similar to what we saw here, the topping out problem, because again, workers may have all these skills that they're using. They're at a top level that they can be paid in your organization by having all the skills, but are they actually able to use them? And again, if the employees aren't rotated through jobs, then they suffer from what we call skills atrophy, meaning that the skills they have go stale. So you might have to reinvest, and keep them up to date, but you have to make sure that they can use the skills in your organization. And again, it leads to increased training costs. So a lot of these advantages and disadvantages of competency-based pay for workers at an operational level, and again under pay for knowledge for workers at a professional or managerial level are outlined in your text, so you can read more there. How are we going to pay these people? How are we going to price what we call the skill blocks? So a skill block is we might bring somebody in at an entry level, and then when they gain a certain level of skill, then we're going to pay them more, so they now have gone through the first level of skill block or the first skill block. Now they've earned another skill or learned another skill, and we're going to pay them more. So now they've gone through the second skill block. So it's kind of like a laddering effect. If you can imagine rungs on a ladder, as you go from one to the next, you're progressing and moving up the block or the skill block. So how do we pay them? Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. The high-low method is one we do see a lot in practice where organizations have pay for knowledge or pay for skill. So what you might do here is you might determine what an entry-level job is paying in the marketplace for what you might hire somebody in at, right? And then you might also look at what the market is paying for a person who comes in at an entry level and say gets to master all of the skills that you might have in your organization, right? So say, for example, somebody comes in at an entry level and you might say, well, I have 5 skill blocks I would put them through, right? By the time they get to that top skill block, what is the market paying for that? So you might look at what the market's paying at the entry level and at the high level. Right? In order for you to attract people into your organization, you might say, well, maybe at the entry level, I'll pay more. And when they get through all the 5 skill blocks in my organization, I might pay them more at that top level. So this might be a little bit confusing. So let's look at a numeric example. Let's say, for example, you're in a company that's using a pay for knowledge or pay for skill system at the operating level. Let's say, for example, at an entry level, somebody might hire in an entry level employee at $40,000. They might also say, for example, if they paid $40,000 for an entry level position in the marketplace, you might look at that entry level position and say, okay, now if the market took that person through, or with the employer they're with right now, if they had developed all these skills, say they went from learning how to do different functions in your organization, by the time they reach my top skill block in my organization, if I had to bring somebody in at the top level of my organization, what would I have to pay if I had to bring them in the market, right? So you can look at it from a market perspective and then determine how much you want to pay at the entry level and at the top level. So say, for example, an entry level position out in the marketplace pays $40,000, right? Let's say the top job that has all the skills that the person coming into your organization can earn, let's say in the marketplace, that job pays $60,000. You might decide, well, instead of me bringing in entry-level people at $40,000 like my competition is doing, maybe I'm going to pay them 10% more and bring them in at $44,000, right? So maybe if the marketplace, by the time somebody goes through my four or five skill blocks, if they would be earning in the marketplace $60,000, maybe I'm going to pay them 15% more, and I would pay them $69,000. So I'm basically going to hire people in at $44,000 and wind up paying them $69,000. So that $25,000 difference can be allocated across the 5 skill blocks. So maybe every time they earn or learn a new skill, I'm going to pay them an extra $5,000 a year for learning that skill. Once they finish their skill block, so they've gone from 44 to 49,000. Then if they learn another skill block, I'm going to take them from 49,000 to 54,000. And then they've, earned it again. So what I'm really doing is I'm looking at what the market would pay at an entry level and at a top skill level that I want to take my people to, and all I'm going to do is up the ante on it and pay them more. That's because I want to protect my investment in these people, right? I want to make sure that I'm not losing them to other competitors. So yes, it's going to cost me more to bring them in. Yes, it's going to cost me more to skill them. I'm paying them more. But again, I want to make sure these people stay with me. So that's kind of the high-low method. That's how it works. If you're looking at a lead lag match strategy, we don't typically tend to find that used a lot with this, but it can be, and it is described in your textbook as well. And all we're doing here is you might decide, well, hey, I'm going to look at what they're paying at an entry level, right? And I'm just going to match that in the marketplace. So once they come into me, say at that $40,000 level, so I'm not going to pay any more to attract them to come to me. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, if the marketplace is going to pay them $60,000 a year, maybe I might decide I want to pay them a little more than $60,000 a year once they reach that top skill level. But I need to make sure that I can bring them from that $40,000 a year entry-level position that I'm bringing them at. And then as they go through each of, say, 5 skill blocks, I'm paying them more as they go through it, right? So as they put more tools in the toolbox, shall we say, or they gain more skill, I'm going to pay them a little bit more. Now, maybe if the market's only paying $60,000 for that set of skills that I want to get them to, maybe I might pay them at that point in time 15% more. So I'm going to make sure by the time they get to the end of that 5th skill block, they're making $69,000 and not $60,000 as the market would be paying. So I'm going to pay them more. So I have to make a decision. Do I want to pay in accordance with high-low method, right? Or do I want to do a match strategy when they enter my organization and then pay them more as they learn the skill so that I now lead the market. Some companies might decide they want to lag. So some companies would actually say, well, maybe we're going to pay you less than the market to bring you in. So maybe instead of bringing you in at $40,000 a year, I might bring you in at $35,000, but the market would only pay $60,000 to somebody with your skill levels once you've maybe got to a higher level of skill, but I'm prepared to maybe pay you $69,000. So you can actually earn an extra $34,000 a year with me as you gravitate through the 5 skill blocks. So again, companies will do it differently. They just have to decide how they want to reward or motivate. And again, you want to be able to time maybe how often you're giving these pay increases out. So it's a cash flow issue for a lot of companies as well. So they'll have to decide how they want to price the skill blocks and at what level they need to bring you in at in order to attract people to come to their jobs. So again, this is all discussed in your book, so you might want to go through the example that they give you in there as well. Make sure now we're at the end of this third segment for Chapter 4. So just make sure that you check your online course and look at what's due this week and next week, because you may have a quiz, a discussion board posting that's due. And you should also look at the outline again and make sure that you've planned, budgeted your time, and make sure you've scheduled enough time to look at what's coming due next week and beyond next week so that you're ready. So again, thanks for listening, folks. And you guys have a good day and a fabulous week.